Hello and welcome to this edition of Fresh Start. Today I'm joined by the lovely Claire Black, who is also a divorce coach and NLP practitioner. And like me, Claire has got a wealth of experience in her own personal life, as well as all the work that she's done with her clients to really help them kind of move on with confidence from their divorce and look back with pride. And she's really a kindred spirit in the way that she works and her kind of values and her approach to the work that she does with her clients. So I'm really glad, Claire, that you've agreed to join us. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me, Nicole.
You're very welcome. So we're going to talk about a topic today that's really poignant at this time of year, which is how you cope with Christmas if you've recently separated or divorced, or perhaps you're in the middle of it, or even you divorced or separated some time ago, but you're still kind of struggling with kind of moving on from that. And especially if you have children and aren't necessarily spending Christmas with them this year. So Claire, just in your experience, obviously there's lots of different events and times of the year when families get together, but why do you think it is that Christmas is such kind of a difficult time for people?
I think there's a few reasons. I think, Christmas, when you're going through a divorce or you're already divorced and you're not going to have your children with you, can be really tough. I mean, the media represents Christmas, of course, as this wonderful time when families are all together, a husband, a wife, 2.4 children, they're all smiling by a massive, great big tree that takes up most of their front window. And, we're presented with this image of what Christmas should be like. And for those of us who are going through a divorce or who are divorced, Christmas just isn't necessarily going to be like that. It's not going to be that wonderful family Christmas with the husband and the wife and the 2.4 children, and that can leave you feeling quite lonely, quite isolated, especially if you know that you're not going to have your children with you. Perhaps on Christmas Day they're perhaps going to be with your ex-husband or their family, or your ex-wife indeed and her family. So I think that's possibly why there's it. And also the world seems to stop. Everything comes to a halt. These other events, birthdays, Valentine's Day even, the world doesn't stop, the shops don't completely shut. Other people sort of retreat into their little family units at Christmas, don't they, in a way that they don't do at other times of the year. And I think that can leave you feeling quite lonely and, as I said, quite isolated.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think you're right in the sense of this idea that it is all about family. It's expected to be a family time, whereas perhaps the other events in the year, as you say, aren't. And it does seem steeped in tradition of how a Christmas should be spent based on what we've seen in American movies. That's kind of Hollywood, Disney.
And whenever I hear that word should, my kind of like, oh. Yeah. So I prefer to think of it, what could Christmas be like? How could it be different? Let's not dwell on what we feel we should be doing. Let's do what works for us.
Yeah. And on that note, so what could people be doing and how could they approach Christmas if you are in that situation where you are going to be on your own or not have the children this Christmas?
So I think there's a couple of things. I think the first thing is to first of all notice how you feel about it. It's very easy to try and suppress those feelings down, isn't it, and squash them, but actually they'll only come back even stronger possibly. So I like to help my clients to acknowledge what it is that they're feeling. What is the worst bit about this? Let's name it, let's get it out there. And actually naming it and acknowledging it sometimes takes away some of the power that has over you. Once you know what it is, then you can start to think of ways that you can perhaps mitigate it. And you can also notice then that those feelings, they come and go. They're transitory, like a wave perhaps. And I like to talk about riding the wave of those emotions. So imagine that you're a surfer and you're paddling out into the sea and you see this wave of emotion coming towards you. Let's turn the board, ride with the wave rather than trying to fight against it or go through it or under it or over it. So ride the wave onto the beach. And once you arrive on the beach, you're safe, you can be still, you can breathe, you can notice that wave is now finished. And then it's time to start thinking, okay, how could I think about this differently? Perhaps what could I do differently? So one thing that I do with my children, and I've been divorced since my children were 3 and 1 and they're 17 and 15 now, so quite a long time. So I've done this Christmas thing, for the last, can't do sums now, but for the last 14 years. We do Christmas on a completely different day when the children aren't with me. So we arrange with my family, with my brother, with my parents, that we're going to get together for a sort of 2 or 3 day block at another point in the holidays. So this year we're going up on the 27th. And we have a whole Christmas. So we do all the presents. We have big Christmas lunch. You know, and actually one bonus is that the shops are open. So if you've forgotten something, you can go and get it. But we do the whole of Christmas on a different day. So my children now, their questions about Christmas, number one question is, whose house are we at this year? Because they can never remember where they were last year.
Yeah.
And number two, if we're not with you, when are we going to see Uncle Richard or Grandma or Granddad? And I think children will take their lead from you on that. So, you know, encourage yourself to think about Christmas. It's just a day, and you can actually still do Christmas just on a slightly different day.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, you know, so my parents divorced when I was 2, and so I don't remember having a Christmas with mum and dad. I always had 2 Christmases and actually loved it. And it was always a case of one year it was you know, Christmas Day with mum and Boxing Day with dad, and then we'd switch. And so I had 2 Christmas days, and I didn't get 2 Christmas stockings. Father Christmas only came once on Christmas
Day.
But other than that, everything was the same. The dinner was the same, the presents, the extended family coming over. It was just that I got 2 Christmases. And actually, as a child, that was one of the things I loved about the fact that my parents weren't together, is I got 2 Christmases.
My youngest son says exactly that.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly that. Then I think that the thing then to do is, you know, arrange your Christmas so that you do have Christmas with the children at a different time. And then it's thinking about what you're going to do for that day when you're perhaps by yourself at home. So I don't mind sharing with you, you know, and your listeners, I'm going to be on my own for the first time this year for Christmas in quite a long time. So I've had to actually do this myself this year and make a plan for what I'm going to do. So plan for when you're going to be by yourself. Think about what could you do that perhaps you couldn't do before. So I'm actually going to spend Christmas with some friends this year, Christmas Day. You know, so try and make it so that your Christmas Day isn't something that's going to make you feel worse than you already do. Spend some time with friends. Perhaps think about what's the best gift that you could maybe buy yourself this year and wrap up and put under your own Christmas tree, so that you're giving yourself something on Christmas Day. Do whatever you want. A friend of mine last year decided that she didn't really want to have Christmas dinner by herself, so she just had beans on toast and took the dog out for a walk and kind of pushed Christmas Day to the side. And she said, I had a really lovely day. It was quiet, there was no one else out, I ate what food I wanted, and I knew I still had Christmas to come with the children. So I think that the key is to plan. And if you know somebody who has been through this and has been on their own for Christmas Day, have a chat with them, find out what they did to make it feel better, model what they did, and just ask yourself, what can I do that would make this better for myself?
Yeah, can you remember what you did the first year you were on your own for Christmas?
The first year that I was on my own without the children, trying to remember back, I've been on holiday. I went on holiday to Morocco one year, which was amazing because there wasn't, well, apart from one big blow up Santa Claus that I saw in a market, there was no sign that it was Christmas at all. That was quite nice.
Yeah, I did exactly the same thing. The year that I got divorced, I didn't have children, but the year I got divorced, I flew out to Australia. So I flew out on Christmas. I left on Christmas Eve and I landed on Boxing Day. And I flew Emirates. There was no Christmas dinner on the plane. There was no mention of Christmas. There was no Christmas films. And then I landed in, and it, you know, it'd been and gone. And then I just made a really big deal about New Year.
Brilliant. I think, you know, the other thing, I was talking to a client, this was last year actually, and she was really worried that she was going to be on her own Christmas Day. And she had an invitation from a friend that she knew would be good fun, so she accepted that. And then she said, well, do you know what, I've always wanted to go on this Boxing Day ride that goes from the local stables, and she was quite big into riding anyway. And I couldn't do that if our son was with us, because we would be doing stuff as a family. So she booked herself onto that ride, and so she spent Boxing Day riding this horse with a lovely group of people through the waves on the beach.
Nice.
You know, what a lovely way to spend the day. So, you know, sometimes it's about thinking outside the box.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, unless you want to be, not necessarily spending it on your own as well. Like there, as you say, there will be friends or other things that you can do, whether it's holidays or groups or other things that you don't, or even volunteering. You don't have to necessarily think that because I'm not in a relationship, therefore I have to be on my own at Christmas.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I was about to say about volunteering as well. And I know people that volunteer, say for shelter, for example. So, you spend Christmas Day helping other people to have a Christmas Day.
Yeah.
And that can be really empowering.
Yeah, it's something I've always said I want to do once the kids are kind of grown up and I I can kind of get away with it. I go and do that. I have to tell my husband that that's what we're doing in a few years' time. That's really helpful. And what about because obviously what you mentioned before about kind of riding the wave and understanding the fact that it's okay to, and allowing yourself to feel the emotions that you feel for Christmas, and that's not necessarily just on the day either, is it? You kind of have this massive build up throughout the month of December, well, probably before that, to be honest. As soon as the shops start playing Christmas songs, you have this kind of this, like, it's coming, and this almost dread. So is there kind of tips that you would or things you'd recommend kind of in the build up and the lead up to Christmas? I know you said about having a plan, and kind of when would you start to kind of think about Christmas and working out what you want to do, and kind of giving yourself the best chance really to enjoy the time over that period?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of organising when children are moving between houses and things, I always think that that's best to be planned as early as possible. And then once you've got your timetable or whatever sorted out, focus on what you can do and take control back where you can. So for example, if you know that your ex-partner is going to have the children for a block, and then you've got a block, or perhaps you've got several blocks within the holidays, if your children are old enough, you can sit down with them and get a big piece of A3 paper and maybe brainstorm stuff that they'd like to do in the time that you are with them, so that you're shifting your focus from the time you're going to not have them to the time that you are going to have them, and have things to look forward to. Take pictures, create memories, think about perhaps new traditions that you might like to create. Sit down with the children and say, right, we're going to do it differently this year. What would you like to do over this period of time? Is there anywhere you'd like to go? Is there something you'd like to see? Is there whatever it is? So design Christmas, the Christmas holidays, the way you want to. I think another thing is to start to plan for you, not just when the children are going to be away, but planning for yourself as well. So I've got a period of 10 days this Christmas where my children are at their dad's. And so I've kind of looked at it and I thought, right, every other day I need to have something that I'm looking forward to. So, one day I'm going shopping with a friend, another friend's having a 50th birthday party, I'm going to go to the theatre. Plan in those things so that you've got punctuation marks in that time, things to look forward to, things that will help you to find a bit of joy over the festive season. And always remember, if this is the first time's always going to be the hardest. It's never going to be as hard as this first time ever again.
Yeah, very true. And I love the idea of what you just said about creating new traditions, because I think that's the thing. Christmas is so steeped in tradition, and you'll always remember what you were doing last Christmas, the Christmas before, or especially if you kind of follow the same pattern, the same kind of, we are all creatures of habit. So often we end up following the same routine at Christmas as well, don't we? But actually, I love the idea of creating new traditions and new kind of ways of doing things. And that doesn't really stop, I don't think. I think once you've got kind of divorce and separation in the family, I mean, both my parents and my husband's parents are divorced, so Christmas is never the same thing for us, because there's so many people and so many extended family to get around during the Christmas period, that we never end up doing the same thing. Because if we're with someone's parents for Christmas last year, it's only fair that we see the other half this year, or whatever. So it's never the same thing, which actually I really like. So I don't have that kind of Christmas tradition that it's always this way, and that has to be the same every year. I think the idea of incorporating the children and getting their ideas and creating new traditions for new Christmases going forward, and thinking about your Christmases going forward as opposed to the ones that you've already lived and been through, I think is a lovely way to, as you say, kind of reframe Christmas, and especially the time that you have to yourself. Because I did the Q&A last week, and we had a few members asking and sort of saying, you know, the idea of doing something new or not being with the children upsets me so much. I'm actually thinking of staying, because the idea of being apart from the children is just so painful. But actually, as you say, it's kind of thinking about what can I do on the time when I'm not with my children, which wouldn't be available to me otherwise, like the lady who went on the ride, you know, through the waves on Boxing Day. You know, what would you like to do that actually you've never considered or allowed yourself to even think about, because it's never been an option before, because you've had the children there, that actually opens up. You get the best of both. You get time with your children and you get time to do the things that you want to do as well, which I think is kind of an opportunity that's missed when you're focusing on the fact that you're not with your kids.
Yeah, exactly. And some of it's about being open to possibilities as well. So, you know, keep your, if you're out with friends or you're having a coffee with somebody, or keep your eyes and ears open for, you know, that leaflet that advertises something and you think, oh gosh, that would be brilliant fun. Or, you know, overhearing in your group of friends, somebody saying, oh, I'm thinking of doing this. You know, so keep your eyes and ears and all your senses open to possibilities for things that you could do. I think one other thing just about the doing it differently thing is that when you do it differently, you're avoiding comparing as well to Christmases past, you know, like the ghost of Christmas past. If you can do it differently and create new traditions and think it, actually another good question is to think about what you won't miss. So that's another good way to look at it. So that might give you ideas for how to do things differently. So for example, do you really dislike turkey, and actually you won't miss eating turkey, so maybe you're going to do a big beef stew, I don't know. Or I remember a client saying to me last year, well, my ex isn't going to be there on Christmas Day, and it's going to be really good because we can make so much more mess, and he won't be following the presents around, picking up the paper and putting them in a bin bag before we've even finished opening the parcel. So thinking about the things you won't miss might help you to think of things that you would like to replace that with in a positive way.
Yeah, that's a really good tip, actually, because I think you're right. I think so often we do things because it's what we've always done. We've never questioned it, but it doesn't mean we actually enjoy it. It's just that tradition, isn't it? And you don't question it.
Actually, so this is a really good opportunity to think, oh, how can I get rid of that thing I really don't like, and what could I replace it with that I really would enjoy?
Yeah. It's interesting that how many times we've said opportunity during this conversation, which you wouldn't think, you know, going into this, if if you are in the situation of it's your first Christmas, or, you know, or perhaps it's, you know, it's not your first, but you haven't kind of managed to do some of this stuff, and therefore you kind of dread it every year that it comes around, that it's not your turn or whatever. But actually, you know, thinking about the opportunities and what you can do instead, and you say could instead of should, I think is great advice. And then what about kind of looking forward for, you know, 2022, and kind of, you know, what comes next after Christmas? I mean, you know, it's that kind of time of year as well, isn't it, where you tend to reflect, and then you think, you know, January is quite a dark, dull month, and quite a long month to sort of get through, and if you've just gone through Christmas perhaps on your own, it can be quite hard to motivate yourself. Have you got kind of any tips for people kind of going into the new year kind of off the back of Christmas?
So I think one thing is to look back and use, I call it the owl and the wow brain, and I can't remember the name of the chap who created that. He's a sports sports coach, whatever, Todd something, can't remember. Anyway, the owl and the wow brain. So if you imagine that you're climbing a mountain and you get halfway up this mountain, you've got a choice. Then you can look up the mountain and say, ow, look how far I've still got to go, and how difficult is that going to be? Or you can turn and look down the mountain and think, wow, look how far I've come. What resources have I used to get there, and how can I use them to take the next few steps forward? And it doesn't have to be giant steps forward, they can just be little steps forward. So, you know, you might get to the other side of Christmas and think, actually, that wasn't as horrific as I thought it was going to be. What really worked? What did I do that made the difference? You know, what was the difference that made the difference? And how can I use that to move forward into the new year, perhaps? Or, you know, start thinking about things you can put in your diary again that you're going to look forward to, that are going to keep you motivated to keep taking those steps forward. And, you know, for some people that might be a big thing. I remember a client who said, oh, I want to walk the Camino de Santiago by myself during the summer. So her little steps forward started with research and looking up other people who'd done it and seeing what their experiences were and watching a movie about it. But your goals might be smaller than that. they might be to take up a new hobby, or explore doing something creative that you've always wanted to do, or make a new resolution to perhaps arrange to meet with a different friend or a new friend once or twice a month. Whatever it is, commit yourself to those things. Perhaps write them up on a piece of paper, put them on your fridge, so that you're keeping them right at the forefront of your mind and thinking about what steps you want to take to move forward.
Yeah, I think having it very visually in front of you or surrounding yourself with kind of reminders is really helpful. We had another coach on here a few weeks ago talking about vision boarding and how to kind of create vision boards and stuff like that, and how much you take in visually when you see things, as opposed to kind of hearing it or writing it even, and the difference that can make. So yeah, having kind of visual cues, I think, is always really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree.
Yeah, we are sponges.
And the more you can see those things in front of you, I've got a vision board on my wall in front of me, the more you see those things, the more they kind of sink into your subconscious. And so subconsciously you're starting to think about taking steps towards achieving those things, I think. And then of course you've got to actually take action, so that's where your action plan of these are the little steps I need to take comes in handy.
Yeah, because I think that's the other thing. People often think they have to take giant leaps, and that, you know, this transition and change is really big and scary, and it always involves like making vast changes. But actually, there's something, isn't there, the 2mm rule, and you just make the smallest change, and it actually can have huge repercussions.
Absolutely.
And you know, that is just, you know, staying kind of disciplined in, you know, looking after yourself and your mindset, and just kind of taking little steps each day, and you will get to where you're trying to get to.
And very much focusing on the bits you can control rather than the bits that you can't. The bits that are very frustrating. So you know, always looking at what choices do I have. That's so important, I think, you know, looking at, because I always say to people, you know, if you've got one option, then you're stuck. And if you think you've got two options, you've got a dilemma, and you're kind of stuck there too. But if you've got three or more options, then you've got choice. Even if one or two of those options are completely crazy and you don't like them, that still means that you're choosing the third option as a conscious, empowered choice to move forward.
Yeah, and actually that's a really interesting point when you think about Christmas, and the fact that actually by having Christmas on your own or being separated means you actually have more choice than you did before, if you were kind of just always following the same pattern of this is what we do every year. And actually sometimes that's scary because you've never had that choice before, you've never had those options or possibilities. But actually, you know, it is a case of you now can be more in control of your own Christmas, because if you know the dates of when you're, you know, on your own versus when you're with your children, you can then plan that time, and the only person you have to consider is yourself and your children. You don't have to worry about you know, other people or your ex or whatever. So actually, if anything, you've got more choice than what you once had.
And I think, you know, it's quite a good exercise to sit down with a piece of paper and I always encourage people to do it with a pen rather than on a computer, because there's something about brain to pen, isn't there? Brain to pen and paper. You know, if you're feeling that you really don't have a choice at Christmas and that you're really stuck and it's going to be really terrible, get a piece of paper and just write down all the things you could possibly think of that you could do, however crazy they might seem, and then look at them and think, okay, which of these are actually realistic? Which one of these might I pick, and how could I start to achieve that and make that happen for myself? And taking action can really help you feel empowered.
Yeah, definitely. And actually that's great advice for Christmas or at any point on this journey. Actually that's a really good one to remember, regardless of where you're at and how far down the road you are, or you know, there is always options, there is always choice. It might not be obvious at the time, but there is. That's really, really helpful. Thank you so much. And I know that's going to be a massive help to our members who are watching, because I know there are a few of them who are, you know, facing exactly that this year, of the first Christmas, or if not the first, then kind of this dreaded Christmas where it's not their turn this year. So I'm sure this will be really, really helpful. Thank you so much, Claire. And Claire's details will be on the website, so if you want to follow up or have any questions, then I'm sure you can reach out through the usual channels. I know you're on Instagram and you've got your website as well, so we'll share all of those details with our members if they have any questions that they'd like to follow up with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nichole. That was brilliant.
No problem at all, and have a lovely Christmas.
Thank you.
Thank you.